We've gotten pretty good feedback on these comments, but people who talk to me when I'm not in front of a camera have said it's time to be even a bit more candid. This week, we cover a topic undoubtedly that will ruffle a few feathers. Let's get into it. This week, we're going to be talking about active management, specifically as it relates to local brokers and advisors whose value proposition to clients is trying to pick stocks and bonds, whether they're an individual company or they work for a big national company. Simply put, we believe that if you're working with someone and you ask them, why am I invested in the things I'm invested in? And their first response isn't something about your goals, your values, your plan, but rather their market outlook, what they think about of a company, that's probably someone who you should be moving on from. The myth we're attacking this week is that anybody in my chair as an advisor, a broker, should be picking individual stocks and bonds for you. And they shouldn't be doing it for three big reasons. Number one, lack of diversification. Number two, lack of accountability, AKA lack of ability. And number three, it's just a misguided use of time that's not in your best interest. Number one, diversification. Most people who are trying to pick individual stocks and bonds for their clients are limiting them to the US because nobody's quite frankly going to buy that they've got an edge on a Taiwanese bank or a Brazilian telecom. The fact is they don't have an edge on Google or Apple either, but the familiarity at least helps perpetuate the myth. The other big issue with that is if they're putting all their time and attention trying to outpick the US stock market, they're not going to have the time and the ability to be spending on all the other different types of asset classes that should be within a well-diversified portfolio. Again, diversification being, by true definition, not just about individual security risk, but being invested in things that aren't going to act the same under the same types of economic conditions. And the reason for that harkens back to the framework we shared last week, which is proper liquidity, income generation, volatility reduction, and ultimately expected return. Second, this could be a piece in and of itself, which is style. Even those active managers who are able to perform at a high level, their style isn't in all the time. And yet if your single person who's putting their favorite 20, 30 stocks in your portfolio, they don't really have one style. I mean, managers in the successful ones, while their style might not be in all the time, the thing that makes them successful over time is that they're able to stick to it at least. Where we can add an edge is coming in, identifying those styles, where we're at in the market cycle, and perhaps toggling, moving, if you will, between the best managers. Second big piece, accountability. Quite frankly, who's holding them accountable? For us, one of the big values we can bring to people is the vetting of managers. Whether we want to use them in the first place or whether we want to continue to use them, we have no economic interest in working with one investment strategy or strategist versus another. We literally sit there on behalf of our clients and pick the best one. But if a broker or an advisor, it is their stock or bond picks, that's what you're going to get, good, bad, or indifferent. I find it highly unlikely that they're ever going to come to you and say, this isn't really my type of market for my type of style, or I've lost my touch. You really should fire me and move on to someone else. Speaking of accountability, I guess this is the elephant in the room. If you look at from 5 to 15-year time ranges, small, mid, large, the point's the same. Roughly, give or take, 90% of active managers fail to beat their benchmark. If you look at the S&P Dow Jones Indices survey, again, that just came out, they reemphasize this. Any of those asset classes, any of those time frames, 85 to 95% of professional managers are not outperforming their benchmark. And we're not talking about your local brokers or advisors. We're talking about trained professionals, full-time, in a very specific niche, teams, resources, still failing to do this. Quite frankly, I find it virtually impossible to believe then that over any time frame, a local broker or advisor is going to add value, justify their fee by stock and bond picking. Common responses we get to this, though, are my portfolio's done pretty well. Everybody's U.S. stock exposure's done pretty well over the last 9 years. And again, that's not a justification that it's working. That just has been a condition of the market. Second is, the one-off story, whether it's an Apple or a Google or an Amazon or a Netflix. The reason that when we talk about 5, 10, 15 years, you see so many pro managers not being able to outperform is that great singular stock pick is only going to make up for so many bad picks, or it's only going to carry your performance for so long. Again, a good pick is not a process, and we're all about process here at 10 Capital. Thirdly, and maybe just as big as any of the previous ones, time management and focus. There's a big difference between being a fund manager and being a wealth manager. Fund managers should be spending all their time specifically looking at a singular niche. A wealth manager is what most clients are looking for, is someone who's going to be looking at your big picture, developing a great plan, making sure you're properly got risk mitigation, that your investments match your goals, and that in and of itself is a full-time focus. And Vanguard and Russell recently put out a couple surveys, again, talking about statistics, facts, that showed two of the biggest ways that people can improve the odds of hitting their plans and ultimately even improve their performance are building great plans and the behavioral finance component. Those two things take a ton of time. Even the behavioral finance part speaks to a lot of time building relationships, time that quite frankly you don't have if you're spending all your time trying to get a read on whether you should buy a singular stock. In closing, when people often hear this outside of recent market performance, they say, well, they're nice and they're a friend. We agree with that. You should be working with someone who's likable, who's trustworthy, but they also need to be competent. They also need to be helpful. The stakes of being wrong are far too big. This is far too important. We want to see people get and be not only be able to get to, but even first and foremost, be able to define those dreams and goals for themselves. To that end, whether it's education, relationship, we'd like to invite all of you to our event next Thursday, downtown, Nectar, 5:30. We've got a guest from Dimensional Fund Advisors speaking along a lot of these same things. Why traditional active management doesn't outperform, how people can properly, even when it's talk about expected return, improve their odds of beating benchmarks. Come and to speak to our guests. We'd invite you to join. Thank you again for all the support, the likes, the shares. We're glad you're finding value in these, and we'll see you next week.